Hello, welcome to Walking in Multiple Worlds and a conversation today we're having with Art Proctor. And I'd like to introduce everyone to Art Proctor. Art, can you give us a little bit about your background?
Hi, I'm Art Proctor. I'm a mixed race Afro-Indigenous individual based out of Treaty 7 territory, which is also known as Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And yeah, I intersect multiple kind of like areas, which is kind of apropos for what we're actually talking about: art, culture, tech, and business. I am a tech steward, digital transformation analyst, independent immersive media producer, and Indigitech digital justice consultant. And I'm the executive director of Indigitech Destiny. So,
Art, you have so many different intersections that you truly are a great representation of this walking in multiple worlds. And we know that you work really closely with understanding resilience and adaptation and how these, different concepts are different. You have different lenses into an indigenized lens on, especially on technology and recognizing how it can preserve and uplift Indigenous cultural heritage. So we're really, really excited and happy to have you speaking with us today. And we have many questions that we want to ask about walking in multiple worlds, in particular about how we can put an indigenized lens on technology. So I'd like to start off by just asking you that question. Basically, how does the integration of an indigenized lens in digital transformation initiatives, how does this contribute to the preservation and celebration of Native and Indigenous cultural heritage?
I will answer that, but let me just step back one to actually give a little bit more background in regards to my Afro-Indigenous identity and technology. Then we can move to that next question, if that's okay.
That's perfect.
So I grapple with the complexities of my identity in balancing my Afro-Indigenous heritage and cognitive differences. Technology has emerged as a refuge and catalyst for the change, providing spaces for my voice and unique perspectives of my community. I explored the concept of an Indigenous lens on technology, recognizing its power to preserve and uplift Indigenous cultural heritage. Despite the digital sphere struggles to find my place in community that often overlooked or have been misunderstood through my intersectionality, each hurdle has brought a deeper understanding of the resilience and adaptation. I carry these lessons from my journey, highlighting the powers of embracing diversity and celebrating multiple identities. Getting back to the concept of how does integration of Indigenous lens and digital transformation initiatives contribute to the preservation and the celebration of Native and cultural heritage. It offers Indigenous communities a platform to amplify their voices and safeguard their cultural legacies. The use of digital tools and the platforms allowed Indigenous people to document their language and oral histories and ancestral knowledge.
So Art, you say that these digital tools and platforms. So can you give us an idea of what kind of tools and platforms?
Well, the same digital tools and platforms that I think we all use. The concept of a computer, the concept of the different iOSs, either Apple or PCs, the concepts of social media or workforce related tools and applications.
Yeah, so these digital archives that you're mentioning, what do they do?
Okay, so there are some depositories and some libraries of Indigenous knowledge on the internet from different organizations, community organizations. In my neck of the woods, there's the Blackfoot Confederacy, there's the Blood Tribe, there is, the business, Black Business Venture Association. There is all kinds of archives.
So Art, we have our grounding tenets here, and can you give me an idea of what does adaptability mean to the greater community?
Adaptability is a crucial skill in integrating communities and cultures. It's a profound connection to humanity's heartbeat. Embracing adaptability involves understanding Indigenous wisdom and tradition, engaging with Indigenous ways of life, honors their heritage, and fosters collective responsibility. And lastly, adaptability is the cornerstone of a thriving global community.
So in there, you talked about understanding. So understanding for Indigenous peoples themselves and also understanding for the outer communities. What does understanding mean to you?
Digital transformation and an Indigenous perspective, recognizing the values of Indigenous perspective in digital transformation, prioritizing digital equity and justice for data and economic sovereignty, acknowledging the historical disadvantages in Indigenous communities, quest for digital literacy, bridging the digital literacy gap for collective prosperity, and empowering and understanding transcending boundaries that will uplift all.
So that's a mouthful and a lot. So how do we navigate all of this?
Embracing change and growth in Indigenous communities, navigating multiple cultures is a profound act of resilience and empowerment. Indigenous communities face societal, global, and economic hurdles. Addressing issues like blood quantum is crucial. Recognizing the complexity of social hierarchies and systems is essential.
Thank you. It's a really comprehensive answer. Let's go on to our next topic.
Digital tools and platforms allows people to document their languages, oral histories, and ancestral knowledge. Digital archives become living repositories of safekeeping and cultural treasures. Leverages technology to assert Indigenous communities' rights and sovereignty, reclaiming control over their narrative and identities, allocating resources to fund digital preservation projects, expand the reach and impact of initiatives.
Oh, Art, so you're talking about these resources. How does it aid in, people becoming more adaptable how does it help them to record or keep their archives current?
Well, digital platforms enable broader access to Indigenous heritage, fostering greater appreciation and understanding, honors the principles of self-determination and cultural autonomy enshrined in UNDRIP. And the UNDRIP article that actually matches that.
First, you mentioned UNDRIP. What is UNDRIP?
So UNDRIP, I can give you the exact
Please.
Definition. United Nations Declarations of Rights of Indigenous People. It's an international instrument that was put in place in 2015 on an international level, and it was adopted by the General Assembly on the 13th of September 2007, but it wasn't enacted in Canada to later on.
So what does UNDRIP do exactly for
It enshrines the minimum standards for survival, dignity, and well-being of Indigenous people, protects the collective rights and individual rights of Indigenous people, and High Commissioner for Rights welcome the adoption of Triumph for Justice and Human Dignity.
That sounds really interesting. Can you give us an example of different efforts that are outlined in the framework of UNDRIP?
Well, one which I was going to adhere to or spotlight is Article 13, which just relates to the question that you just asked me. Indigenous people have the right to revitalize, use, develop, and transmit to future generations their history, languages, and oral traditions, philosophies, writing systems, and literature. and to designate and retain their own name or communities, places, and persons.
Okay, that's very interesting. So that really aids in that understanding category, right? It helps helps everyone to understand or at least embrace these different perspectives and ideas. But let's kind of think about the next section, this whole navigation. How does UNDRIP help us to do this navigation portion? So can you provide us a concrete example of how digital technology, and this is through the lens of Indigenous perspectives, how has that been utilized to preserve cultural identity? And how does this initiative align with the broader policies of human stories?
I will give you an example of a local group that I have worked with multiple times. They're USAY, or Urban Society of Aboriginal Youth, and they have multiple aspects, but I'll just focus on one. The Indigimaps initiative, preserving and celebrating First Nature culture.
That's really a cool name, Indigimaps. So can you tell us more about it?
Indigimaps, okay, led by the Urban Society of Aboriginal Youth, the project uses technology to preserve and celebrate First Nations culture. The project's aim is to preserve and celebrate the land's connection to Indigenous identity and heritage. USAY is mapping out traditional First Nations, places, name, historical sites, and cultural landmarks using digital tools.
So with this USAY, how does it help other, like everybody's working towards, or everybody's trying to work towards having more Indigenous representation. So how does USAY in particular, how do they involve Indigenous communities in this effort, not just doing it, from the outside, but how is it incorporating the thoughts and ideas of the communities themselves?
They project and revitalize language, culture, and history, honoring the rights of Indigenous people to share, develop, and transmit their traditions. Their stories behind these names hold a piece of history and a connection to the land stretching back centuries. Through Indigimaps, the project empowers communities, fostering understanding, and builds more inclusive society.
So can you say that the Indigenous communities themselves are involved in the projects? Are they involved in the projects?
Yes, all of them. Like
Right.
they actually have consultation and collaboration with all the stakeholders in community.
So can you give me or give us an idea of how does USAY integrate Indigenous perspectives into the digital art and technology? How do they do that?
By using multiple tools from websites, augmented reality, virtual reality, gaming, print, art therapy, in a sense where they actually get community, because they're a youth-based organization, so they actually have youth events. They actually have online, kind of like a repository and website that they use to actually engage with that community. They have an app. They do lots of really cool things in community.
So how do they uphold like core values to provide this direction? How are they doing that?
Hold on just one second here. My computer's just acting up a little bit. uh,
We've
so
had the same day. Everybody's having exactly the same day computer issues. So I totally understand.
okay, so Urban Society of Aboriginal Youth upholds the core values that assist in providing direction to the decision-making and relationships within the organization at all levels: governance, operations, membership, etc. Their key values are traditional knowledge, values and culture, diversity, involvement and commitment of youth leadership in the USA governments, involvement of Indigenous youth at all levels, a capable and well-trained and reliable staff, partnership and collaboration, respect, adaptability to change that includes resilience and versatility, accountability, and fun.
I like this one, fun. How is fun used at USAY or USAY?
Well, fun, I think, if you're not having fun, I think fun is the most core value of learning.
Mhm.
If you're not going to have fun, you're not going to learn. I
Yeah.
know that for my own personal experience, and when I used to actually teach kids, uh, that was my modest my motive. And I'm going, if you're not going to have fun, you're not going to learn. So
Yeah. I like this idea of fun as a teaching value. That's just a
yeah.
nice idea to think about. Yeah.
So does that answer your question?
Yes, that does. So let's going a little bit further. We're thinking about digital knowledge keepers. So in what way does the concept of a digital knowledge keeper address concerns regarding the potential loss of culture in Native and Indigenous communities? And amid this, whole digital transformation of education. So how do we keep Native Indigenous communities keeping their culture, as well as, how does it intersect with economic and social benefits? So kind of on the two, keeping the old ways, the culture alive, but at the same time, helping out with modern economic and social benefits.
Well, that's a mouthful. And to be honest, I've just been through a couple of sessions and panel discussions the last week that were talking specifically about that.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm connected to the Canadian Council of Aboriginal Business IP series, IP standing for intellectual property, and how intellectual property uh, in the Western world and how that actually relates to the Indigenous world, and how that is a very interesting marriage or divorce, if you want to be at times, of how they can interrelate. But
So, in this thinking about this, who are the who are the traditional knowledge keepers, I would say, in
well,
Native Indigenous.
usually in community, it is elders or people of a certain age or experience.
Mhm.
But now in 2024, with the majority of the 7 generations about to pass on to the great beyond, there is a full court press to actually get knowledge passed on from those knowledge keepers that are in their 70s or 80s to a younger generation that we can actually pass on to subsequent generations down the road.
So these digital knowledge keepers, what I guess the elders would do preserve what through stories and artifacts and practices. So how do the digital knowledge keepers, what are their attributes that they would use in order to preserve and archive?
So I'll give you a little brief kind of like concept of how I see traditional and digital knowledge keepers. So traditional knowledge keepers are elders who preserve cultural artifacts and practices. Digital knowledge keepers are tech-savvy innovators who offer creative solutions for archiving and restoring cultural artifacts. Working together, these companions breathe new life into the cultural artifacts and practices, ensuring their preservation and accessibility for future generations.
That's really great because I think that speaks to that adaptability portion. So cultures are adapting, they're keeping the essence, the core, but they're adapting by using these digital methods and means. So that's really great. You can continue.
Yeah, the partnership fosters understanding and appreciation of Indigenous culture, creating dialogue, collaboration, and mutual respect. The impact is profound, restoring pride, resilience, and identity.
Well, that's really interesting too, because that also ties in the other two, right? So first we have the adaptability piece, but by adapting to modern times, we're now helping others and ourselves, if you're a member of an Indigenous group, to understand your culture and others outside to understand the culture, and also helping people to just navigate how to intersect and interact and work collaboratively with these Native and Indigenous people. So thank you for that definition.
But with that said, I said all that, and I'll say this, that it's easier said than done because we still actually have traditional knowledge keepers that are very old school and are
Mm,
very hesitant of actually adopting digital things because they believe it is a disservice to the oral tradition.
mm,
And going back to the concept of how do you protect that intellectual property
uh-huh.
from getting out to the general public that uh, may abuse that.
Mm. But it is something that we all have to keep into consideration. And maybe another great topic for another future chat would be how to allay those fears, right? And how to help members of the older generation or the more conservative generation. It doesn't have to be older. There are a lot of younger people who feel the same way, right?
Yep.
How to give them the safeguard or make them feel safe and well held in order to, I guess, embrace digital technology. But I know that you're really busy with your Indigitech destiny. So can you tell us how this dual approach of hosting tech conferences and fostering education mentorship programs, how does this contribute to the empowerment and economic sovereignty of First Nation, Métis, and Inuit individuals within the digital landscape?
So Indigitech Destiny started off as a conference, which was a catalyst um, back a couple of years ago in response to a thing that we have in Canada called Truth and Reconciliation Day,
Mm,
um, which was adopted around 2015 or so, give or take. Uh, and there was 94 calls of action. Uh, so I'm involved with a local organization called Rainforest Alberta. They're a tech ecosystem, kind of like startup meetup group.
mhm,
It's that's looking at the social impact of how to actually engage a community to actually adopt these principles. And I was asked to speak one Wednesday in regards to that, and through that, that became a major kind of like awesome kind of perspective, and people going, "You should do more about this." And then the next month after that speech was Innovation Week (YYC), which is a big thing that we have for like a week to 10 days every year in October.
mhm,
And I put together on very short notice, less than 2 weeks or so, um, a little small pilot conference, um, jokingly because I wanted to engage other people to uh, the concept without me speaking. But in me doing this, I became the facilitator and a speaker. So I I laughed at myself at the concept of me trying to get away from something, and it actually just made me more focus on it.
yeah.
um,
So I
but
think we have here in this slide, this truth, tech, and reconciliation. So can you kind of tell us how you kind of how you live this, how you work this in with your conferences and your talks and everything that you do?
so Indigitech Destiny's Initiative for Indigenous Success, we host a tech conference for Indigenous tech industry talent to showcase skills and network with industry leaders. We're in development to run education and mentoring programs for specifically student or young Indigenous individuals that excel in the digital landscape. Uh, Again, develop and provide opportunities for education and mentoring sessions in tech, business, and creative industries.
Mm,
And our aim is to empower Indigenous individuals to thrive in the digital age, boosting economic opportunities and sovereignty within Indigenous communities.
wonderful. So I like your best practices here. Um, I really think that these can be used regardless of what group you're working with, right? It's always important to follow these bullet points that you've outlined. And can you give us I guess, a little bit of a back history on how you came up with these?
Um, well, for me, I grew up with those principles because people actually taught me those principles from a young age, being multi-ethnic, multicultural, all that kind of stuff. Um, it was instilled in me that honesty is the best policy. Authenticity uh, breeds uh, kind of like reputation and
Mm-hmm.
and, a good standing in community, and building relationship is a must, I think, in any realm that we do, regardless if it's friendship, uh, business, relationships, romantic, whatever. That if you don't actually have that solid ground of a personal relationship with a person, uh, nothing's going to actually materialize out of that. For
Yeah,
me,
I particularly like bullet point number 4. Can you talk a little bit about that one? That one's really intriguing.
so avoid extractive and exploitative practices. Is
No,
that
the use your influence one.
uh, you okay? So let me just reread it, please. Use
Use your influence and resources in aligned collaboration with Indigenous communities. I like a couple of things. I like the using your influence to do something good for someone else, and I really love aligned collaboration. So, how do you feel about aligned collaboration?
So for me, it depends on the aspect that you're coming from and the community that you're coming from. If it's for me, then use my influence, my background, my experience to actually help um, other people to move forward in their journey. If
Hmm.
you're going to do it from a colonial versus kind of like indigenous thing, then allyship is a completely different thing. But allyship that are in line with indigenous practices, they can use their privilege and their background to actually help move um, the lesser or underrepresented community in a better and forward movement. So
Hmm.
in collaboration, allyship and the indigenous or people of color or underrepresented terms or whatever the
Hmm.
buzzword is these days. Uh, with that, yeah. So I believe strongly that if you have the opportunity and the wherewithal and the resources to actually help someone, help community, I think um, it's beneficial and you should actually do it. I I think you should do it. I can't tell anybody what to do, but I think you should.
Well, I'm sure if everyone followed these 5 best practices, we'd have a much better world to live in. And so thank you so much for joining us today, Art. It's been a really fruitful discussion, and I'm sure everyone listening to this will agree with me. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I hope you've had as much learning as I've had listening to Mr. Art Proctor explain to us these 3, I guess, tenets or grounding tenets of, adaptability, understanding, and navigation, and looking at how do we embrace technology through an indigenized lens. So next in our series, our Walking in Multiple Worlds series, we will have another speaker, and we're going to announce the speaker on March 18th. So stay tuned, and I hope you'll join us then.